Once again on a Sunday, on the first Sunday in September of 2022. Time does fly, and we are going to do a completely silent service this morning, and I'm going to shut my mic off so you don't hear me snore. It'll look like I'm in deep meditation. Just joking. Actually, the service is going to kind of play on these ideas of sleeping and dreaming, as we often see when we touch on these perennial philosophies and wisdom traditions, that the dream, as we understand it, in terms of the esoteric teaching, is when we are asleep to reality. We don't really know what is real. And the dream has us literally envisioning or imagining another world in place of reality. That's why it's called dream and not reality. You know, long ago, the Greek philosophers played with this idea of appearance versus reality. And I think the best illustration that came out of that ancient deliberation was Plato's Allegory of the Cave that many of you are familiar with, taken from the 7th chapter of the Republic. And where Plato is saying that we as human beings are basically born in chains, that we are chained to the belief system that we are in a world of darkness, a world of dream, a world of appearances. And that when we look out, we can't really turn our heads very far. We can't really open up our perception too far to see beyond the cave wall that is in front of us. And all we see are the shadows cast by those who are moving behind us, past this great bonfire that we can't see. And Plato goes on to say that one person in his story is able to break free of his chains and makes the long, arduous climb up the steep embankment of the cave and realizes that there is this bonfire burning, and goes beyond that lower light and comes to the opening of the cave, and the sunshine there is so bright that it takes a while to adjust. But when he does finally adjust his eyes, he's able to breach the threshold of the cave and go into the outside, or the beyond. And Plato says, and then this freed prisoner beholds the good, the one, in the form of the sun, right? The higher light. And then this individual, we're told, comes back down with this liberating wisdom. Oh my God, this is really what's going on, and now I see. Wait till my friends get a load of this. So Plato says that the individual comes back down and begins to share the discovery with those that are still in chains. And Plato says something that seems a bit counterintuitive at first, that instead of celebrating the fact that this individual had liberated from all appearances and has now seen what reality is really like, instead of being happy about that and wanting some of that themselves, they actually turn on this individual and want to kill him. And so this is Plato's little bit of a story about his mentor or master, Socrates. That Socrates was historically said to have been put to death by the democracy at Athens because of the charge of corrupting the youth. In other words, Socrates was showing that in his dialogues and questionings with the citizens of Athens, through this kind of Socratic questioning or dialogue, Socrates was able to allow individuals to see that they really didn't know what reality was. They thought they did. They had their ideas of justice and democracy and God and reality and what is the ethical life and etc. But when pressed on these ideas, they were all unexamined. They were all unfounded. They were dream. And so it behooved the governing body of Athens to kill one who has seen the good and wants others to find it for themselves. So we're told by Plato. But we are now in a different stage, I would hope, in our dialogue this morning. We are going to talk about appearance versus reality, but we're going to see that we've come to another cusp within the great calendar of the ages. One of the things that Plato does discuss, I believe he's been influenced heavily by the Hindu or Vedic science that was definitely coming over from India, and that is there are different ages, epochs or yugas, that cycle through human and cosmic experience. And in Plato's words, he described them as the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. Very similar allegory or illustration is happening in India. The Kali, the Treta, Dwapara, the Satya, Dwapara, Treta, and Kali Yugas. And basically what that's saying is when the ages shift, the entire planetary psyche, all the consciousness on the planet, will undergo a shift. And if you've been studying spirituality for any great length of time, you've known this term, the shift of the ages. Greg Braden wrote a book back in probably 1991 or 92 called Awakening to Zero Point. And if you looked at that book, you'll see that Braden was saying at that time, 30 plus years ago now, that we are all undergoing as a human species a collective initiation, a cosmic initiation, because we are all shifting to what Braden is calling in that book 0 point. What does that mean? It means that we're coming back to the deeper substratum of life, where we will then reconnect to the miraculous, to the superabundance, to infinite potentiality, all within the heart of our own lived experience. You get this echoing in Jeremiah and the Hebrew Bible, where it says, in that day, the knowledge of Yahweh will cover the earth as waters cover the sea, and all shall know my law. All shall know this 0 point field of pure being or Yahweh. And so what we're seeing then is this messianic promise that we will somehow come into a different mode or dimension of perception. You see this in the Tibetan tradition of the Kali Chakra Tantra. If you're familiar with this, Shambhala, you've heard of Shambhala, this mythical kingdom set within the Himalayas, far in the recesses of northern India, is said to be a mystical, magical kingdom. And at the end of the cycle of time, Kali Chakra means wheel of time, there's going to be an eclipse of the barbaric, war-based powers that are dominating our culture and societies globally. And the rise of the Shambhala kings will come back, and they'll be restored the Dharma, the love of neighbor as self, etc., etc., etc. Again, an epical prophecy where you will have Maitreya Buddha as the new incarnation coming in the form of the historical Buddha now to usher in the age of Shambhala. You have this in Hinduism with the Kalki avatar coming in to usher in an age of peace, the return of Jesus, the messianic or Moshiach of the Jewish tradition, still different from Christianity in some cases, but nevertheless this idea. And then finally in the Shi'i or Shia Islamic traditions, you have the Mahdi. And the Mahdi is the great teacher who is godlike, a light being who will come back to rescue those who desire to serve God and end the tyranny of the dark forces. So what does all of this mean? Is it just mythical? Is it just legendary? Or are we able to actually recognize how in our lived experience this can be something that we now, in our time, embody? See. Well, there's good news and bad news to that question. One of the things that is said, and if you look at the apocalyptic sections of the Gospels, these are the sections. Remember, apocalypse means the unveiling. So as this new age approaches in the human experience, there's going to be an unveiling. There's going to be clear seeing. And there's going to be a shifting of the power structures. So Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 24, that there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. There's going to be false messiahs. There's going to be a lot of deception running rampant on the earth. But those who are desiring truth will be able to ride those waves and still abide within the promise that they will see the one who is coming. And so what we recognize in those stories that Jesus tells is what the Jewish tradition calls the Hevle Mashiach, the birth pangs of the Messiah. So the next age that's coming, the Olam Haba, the world that's coming, is preceded by contractions. That the whole planet, this is Paul's view in Romans chapter 8, the whole planet's groaning in travail, waiting to give birth to the beings of light, the Messianic age. So in other words then, this travail, this struggle, these upsets, this conflict that's going on in our present day, if viewed from this idea of the shift of the ages, is just another symptom that we can check as an indicator of what's to come. But if we're spiritually blind or dreaming or lost in appearances, chained in seeing only the shadows on the cave wall, we have no clue what's going on. In fact, there's a lot of dread, insecurity, anxiety, etc., if we are just looking at things in terms of happenstance. It's just, the chaos with no meaning, no direction, no deeper understanding that can make sense of this. But that would go against everything in nature. See, one of the things that we jettisoned when we had our scientific enlightenment shortly after, now remember, the scientific enlightenment eclipsed the age of faith. So in 1789, in many ways, we kind of threw the baby and the bathwater of religion out in terms of our intellectual pursuit. And that then led shortly after to a real winnowing down of what science will allow in. And one of the things that science definitely wanted to, or scientism, I should say, the religion of materialism, they pruned off this idea of teleology. Teleology means that just like an acorn has the potential to be an oak, and if you allow all of the natural conditions to just be present, plant it, water it, sunshine, that acorn will be an oak. Can't stop it. So the telos, which means the end point of that acorn, is an oak tree. And it has within it 0-point energy. In other words, not only is it one oak tree, but that oak tree gives birth to other acorns. And from that one acorn, you can have a forest of oak trees. Right? This is the idea of 0-point energy, infinite potentiality. And everything is operating in this teleological way. So in other words, stay with me. We have a telos as a human species. And that's why these ages are basically our stages of development. So if you look at things in this way, we are at the cusp of another breakthrough in consciousness evolution. And we can call that this morning the Messianic era, the age of enlightened, Messianic, Christed consciousness that is now made available to all of us who ask and want to receive. So having had that introduction, we're going to look briefly at this Messianic idea in Judaism, which is the title of a book by Gershom Scholem, who was a great scholar of Kabbalah and Judaism in the mid-20th century. And I just want to read a little excerpt from this book by Gershom Scholem. And he's talking again about this messianic consciousness, this shift of the ages. the arrival of the Messiah himself is tied to impossible, or at any rate, highly paradoxical conditions, probably never expressed in a more melancholy and humanly contorted way than in this sharpened expression of a saying from the Zohar, namely, the Messiah will not come until the tears of Esau will be exhausted. Okay? Everybody good with that? Clear, right? The Messiah will not come until the tears of Esau will be exhausted. How many know the story of Jacob and Esau? What we have here is a Bible story in Genesis. Jacob and Esau were twin brothers, and they were fighting from the womb, it says in the Bible. And lo and behold, their dad was blind as a bat by the time that they were older. And in that day and age, in that culture, the dad gave the birthright to the eldest son in a formal blessing. So when Esau was out in the field, Jacob stole the blessing, dressed like Esau. Esau was hairy. Jacob put on some animal fur and convinced his blind dad to give him the birthright. Once that's done, it's done. You can't take it back. So Esau's crying. He lost his birthright. Somebody stole it. My brother stole my birthright, my inheritance. So this is a huge thing, and it puts the brothers at odds. And what the Zohar, this great compendium of Kabbalistic lore, is saying is that we're not going to be able to experience the Messianic age until Esau stops crying. What does that mean? Well, he goes on, he says, of all the conditions for redemption, truly the most surprising and at the same time the most impossible for Esau to stop crying. For the tears of Esau are those which, according to Genesis 27:38, he shed when Jacob deceived him to gain Isaac's blessing. Among the most famous sayings of this kind, so Sholom's shifting just a bit here, and this is very important. One of the sayings that correspond with this, that go along with this, is coming from this Rabbi Israel of Rizim. And this is what he says, that in the days of the Messiah, human beings will no longer quarrel with their fellow human beings. Rather, man will quarrel with but himself. His bold suggestion that the Messianic world will be a world without images, in which the image and its object can no longer be related, which apparently means that a new mode of being will emerge which cannot be imaged or pictorially represented. So, two very important things here for us to consider in our journey this morning. One is, when the Messianic age begins to dawn in our consciousness, as we undergo this collective initiation, we're no longer going to be quarreling with our brother. We're going to see our brother differently. And we're no longer going to be beguiled by appearances. We're going to see reality as it is. No longer the shadows on the cave wall, but the light of the good, the true, and the beautiful will be shining in our hearts like the Torah. The law of life will be restored to our awareness. So this is an important principle that we're going to be unpacking as we go along this morning. And to play with you a little bit, probably in a very nerdy way that you might not appreciate, but I will. Let me take a drink first. You have no idea. So in the Kabbalah, this is, fascinating stuff. I've spent a long time looking at this stuff, and it never ceases to amaze. In the Kabbalah, you have this idea of what's called gematria. We get our word geometry out of this word. And gematria means that you take these letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which are numerical as well. And if you look at a book in Hebrew, you don't have numbers. You have letters showing you what page you're on, what chapter, etc. The letters are numbers. Same in Greek. If you look at Esau, they also do something very interesting with Esau. So the name Esau, remember, is the brother who gets robbed of his blessing. And in Judaism, Esau is the enemy. In fact, if you've known the Essene community at Qumran and the Dead Sea Scrolls that were uncovered there in 1945, there's this war scroll where it's the sons of light versus the sons of darkness. And the kingdom of Edom, or Edom, is the Roman Empire that's coming to destroy the Jews. And that's Esau. Esau hasn't stopped crying. And he's pissed. And he's powerful. And he's coming to destroy the Jews. And so the Jews are praying and praying and praying for God to rescue them. They thought they had everything down. All their T's were dotted, or their T's were crossed and their I's were dotted. And they figured, hey, we're doing the right thing. The angels are going to come and fight on our side, and we're going to destroy this barbaric race. Well, it didn't go as planned. And if you ever go to Masada or other parts of the Levant or Near East, you're going to see that this is where the holdouts were, where the Romans eventually came and wiped them out. Esau won. And it's because Esau was still being perceived as the enemy. Remember, in the Messianic age, we're no longer going to fight with our brother. We're going to fight with ourselves until we realize what's really going on so that we can get beyond our images, our false dream. So this is the play on the word Esau, or the name of Esau. Esau is spelled Ayin Sin Vav in Hebrew. Now this Vav is the final letter. It's the V in Esau. The letter itself means to connect. It's actually, it's a conjunction if it shows up in Hebrew. It's the word and if it shows up just on its own in Hebrew. It's a connector, right? There's a lot to say about it, but I'd have to have a whole class just on this. So Esau is ending with a connector. If you're no longer fighting with your brother, you'll see that there is this opportunity right here in front of you, facing you, to connect. And when you connect with your brother, this is where it gets really fun and interesting, the letters will rearrange. You'll never see your enemy again in the same way. If you rearrange the letters of Esau, and all that has to happen here is that the Vav needs to shrink a little bit. It has a long stem. If that stem shrinks, you don't have to change the form of the letter. It becomes the letter Yod. And if you rearrange the letters, you get Yasha, Yod, Shin, Ayin, which means salvation. So when you connect with your brother, you will literally rearrange your perception and see the enemy become the Savior. That's just what's so. That is the inaugural point that will happen in your consciousness as you cross the threshold into the Messianic age. No more divisions, no more war. We will beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks. There will no longer be war in my holy mountain. The Torah will go out to all. This law of life and inclusion. So this is the idea that we have to see. And how do we connect with our brother and change our enemy into salvation? You got to give up your images. You're not even seeing your brother. You're seeing your images of your brother. Which brings us to our next reading. So this is a Anthology of Sacred Prose, edited by Stephen Mitchell, probably known best as the husband of Byron Katie. The Enlightened Mind. So Novalis is one of these mystics that is included in this anthology, and just a couple of little aphorisms from Novalis here. Listen to this. We are close to waking up when we dream that we are dreaming. That's when we start to go lucid. You start to say, am I dreaming right now? You can do that. And the answer is yes, you are. You're dreaming right now. There's a part of your mind that can actually wake up right here. That's what's beautiful about A Course in Miracles. He says the miracle does nothing except to show the dreamer who she is. It gives you the recognition, the miracle does, which is an energy impulse coming from the Holy Spirit. And it basically has you go lucid in your dream. And you recognize that you're no longer lost in the dream figures and appearances of a dream. You realize you're the perceiver, the knower, the witness, the dreamer. And as you start going lucid in your dream, you start resting back into the 0-point field of infinite potentiality, because that's what you are. And you can start bending the laws of the dream and changing the fabric of the dream, hence the Messianic age. You can't do that if you're hating your brother. You can't do that if you take appearances for reality. Novalis. Philosophy, right? This love of Sophia, this love of wisdom, this love of prajna, paramita, the wisdom that sees beyond appearances. Philosophy is really homesickness. This longing to return to your root, to your source, to yourself. And then finally from Novalis, when you understand how to love one thing truly, then you also understand how best to love everything. Which reminds me of a story from the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. A woman once came to Ramakrishna and said, all of this talk about devotion to God and Kali and Krishna and Shiva, I just don't feel that. I can't connect to the worshiping of these statues and the rituals. And Ramakrishna said, well, tell me, what do you love? And she said, I love my granddaughter. He says, that is now God for you. And if you can love that granddaughter with the purity and innocence that love demands or is, then you'll begin to wake up to God. Right? So it's the spark of true love, and when it begins to grow, it will show us how to love everyone. Okay? And remember, in order to enter the Messianic age, we have to allow this universal compassion and love to dawn in our heart. We can no longer fall prey to divisions. Even if the language seems to be wanting to heal, wanting to bring together, listen a little longer, and permeating oftentimes is still an us versus them paradigm. That is the language of fear. That keeps you stuck in the chains of the cave, and you'll never get out of identifying with false appearances. which brings us to our third reading. This is coming from Henry David Thoreau. Bear with me, it's a little bit lengthy, not too much so, but well worth the listen. So this is what Thoreau has to say to us this morning. Shams and delusions are esteemed for soundest truths, while reality is fabulous or a fable. If men would steadily observe realities only and not allow themselves to be deluded, life, to compare it with such things as we know, would be like a fairy tale and the Arabian Nights entertainments. If we respected only what is inevitable and has a right to be, music and poetry would resound along the streets. When we are unhurried and wise, we perceive that only great and worthy things have any permanent and absolute existence. That petty fears and petty pleasures are but the shadow of the reality. This is always exhilarating and sublime. By closing the eyes and slumbering and consenting to be deceived by shows, men establish and confirm their daily life of routine and habit everywhere, which is still built on purely illusory foundations. He just said here, we are actually choosing to be deceived. And then we go on our everyday life thinking this is just the way it is, out of my control. I'm not the dreamer, I'm the dream. I'm not the cause of what I see. Something else is causing me. I'm helpless. I'm an illusion. I'm chained. I see only appearances. Children who play life discern its true law and relations more clearly than men who fail to live it worthily, but who think they are wiser by experience, that is, by failure. I have read in a Hindu book that there was a king's son who, being expelled in infancy from his native city, was brought up by a forester and growing up to maturity in that state, imagined himself to be among the barbarous race with which he lived. One of his father's ministers, having discovered him, revealed to him what he was, and the misconception of his character was removed, and he knew himself to be a prince. So remember now, when we look at these ideas like the Kali Chakra or the age of Shambhala, when the barbarians will be destroyed, it's not your brother or your brothers. It's not the groups that you don't agree with. It's not another ethnic tribe or a nation. It is your beliefs in the illusion that you take to be reality. So just like the prince got lost and identified as a barbarian, the realization literally changed the barbarism in his mind to the enlightened state. That's what the Messianic age in its true nature is designed to do. Thoreau continues, so soul, continues the Hindu philosopher, from the circumstances in which it is placed, mistakes its own character until the truth is revealed to the soul by some holy teacher or teaching, and then it knows itself to be divinity itself. I perceive that we inhabitants of New England live this mean life that we do because our vision does not penetrate the surface of things. We think that that is which appears to be. God himself culminates in the present moment and will never be more divine in the lapse of all the ages, and we are enabled to apprehend at all what is sublime and noble only by the perpetual instilling and drenching of the reality that surrounds us. The universe constantly and obediently answers to our conceptions. Whether we travel fast or slow, the track is laid for us. So very insightful ideas here, that our conceptions give us the reality that we're experiencing, and we are at a loss within this view of reality to actually see what is truly here, because we're being beguiled by appearances. Right? And if we only stay on the surface of things as an individual and as a society, we are easily deceived, because we don't realize that the choice to remain in our chains and focused on simply the appearances have us actually shutting off the abundant life from our own awareness. And what makes matters even more precarious is we think somebody else is doing it to us. And then we label them the other, the enemy, the one who's trying to take what is rightfully ours. And we need to divide ourselves from them and label them as unworthy. An attack, even if it's just mental. So be wise and be warned. Because if you do not wake up from knowing that this is all a dream, you will be led with a hook in your nose into all of these dream scenarios that will seem to be dreamed for you. And all they're really doing is mirroring back to you your willingness to be deceived and duped and led astray by somebody else's dream. It's time for you to shake off the shackles of sleep, my brothers and sisters. You are not who you think you are. You're the prince and the princess that have lost their way from the kingdom of light. And now, at this shift of the ages, it is time to remember who you are. And collectively, we can dream another dream. The tracks are laid. The way is set. We just need to be willing to open to it. So just take a moment. We're going to shift gears into more of the same, but seen from a more interior perspective. So we just want to digest what's been given so far. Find your breath and embrace the silence for a moment, and realize that all of your guidance is within the still small voice, within the silence of your heart. And let's make a vow together this morning that we no longer want to run away from our great inheritance. We want to claim it. And we know, unlike the inheritance that Esau desired for himself, this inheritance is where everyone wins. Everyone is welcome. And everyone can discover their true abundance and true happiness. We claim that, not only for ourselves, but for all this morning. And there is a voice within that will reveal it to you. We just have to turn towards it with our whole heart, and we will discover it. Okay. So we are now going to finish up today with some readings taken from A Course in Miracles, chapter 30, The New Beginning. So remember, this is all an inside job. You know, there's a book that was written, the subtitle of the book is, It's All in Your Mind. You just don't know how big your mind is. So this journey appears to be an inner and an outer experience. What you're going to realize as we go through this new beginning or this shift into the Messianic era is that your consciousness is both within and without. It's you, no matter where you're looking. And that can be a terrible thing, or it can be a glorious thing. You decide. But remember, as we approach this reading, there are these key principles that we've already covered, and that is, no longer is it a war of brother versus brother. It is a direct inquiry into your mind and how you've been beguiling yourself by taking appearances as if they were reality. And now, because of your relationship to your source, you can actually undo that and allow reality to dawn in your mind. Right here, right now. It doesn't depend on time. It depends on your willingness and readiness to have it so. Do you want this love and peace restored to your awareness right now? Do you want to know and stand in the certainty that you are in the blessed life and nothing can harm you or change your safety, threaten it in any way? Appearances deceive, says Jesus in the Course, because they are appearances and not reality. Dwell not on appearances in any form. They but obscure reality, and they bring fear because they hide the truth. So how do we not dwell on appearances? Well, first, close your eyes for a moment. This is where your contemplative or prayer life or meditation practice has a key part to play in your awakening from the dream. When you allow your mind to go quiet, and all of the waves of your consciousness can go still, you realize that any emotion, any thought, any image is impermanent, temporary, finite. So you turn your attention away from the impermanent, and you rest within the silence of the witnessing experience. And if you directly look into the nature of your mind, there are no appearances there. There is simply a lucid, bright awareness. This is the 0 point. This is the abundant life. So as you listen further, Stay out of the beguiling influence of appearances. Let thoughts come and go. Let emotional states ebb and flow. Let all images be seen for what they are, temporary apparitions on the cave wall. But there is one in you that is adamantine, diamond-like, which is the knower, the perceiver, the indestructible awareness. Be that, know that, remember that. You are that. Rest in it. Allow it to show itself to you without your commentary, without your delusional dreams trying to figure it out. This is the Christ consciousness, hidden in plain sight. That's why Jesus goes on to say, in regards to this primordial, indestructible awareness that is listening right now, he calls it God's Son. God's Son needs no defense against his dreams. His idols do not threaten him at all. His one mistake is that he thinks his dreams are real. What can the power of illusions do? Appearances can but deceive the mind that wants to be deceived. And you can make a simple choice that will forever place you far beyond deception. You need not concern yourself with how this will be done. For this, you cannot understand. But you will understand that mighty changes have been quickly brought about when you decide one very simple thing. You do not want whatever you believe an idol gives. For thus the Son of God declares that he is free of idols, and thus is he free. Idols, these appearances in the world, political parties, anything that's going to divide you, separate you off, limit you within an ideological framework, promise you fulfillment within the shadow land of false appearances. These are all idols. When you're ready and you want to wake up from your dream, you will no longer give your allegiance, your election, your vote to idols that divide. But you will understand that mighty changes have been quickly brought about when you decide one very simple thing. You don't want what idols are selling. Just take a moment. Put this into your own words that would make sense for you, and get the impact that it will have on your everyday choices when you start to want to wake up as this immortal consciousness. And you will recognize the ideas of separation in whatever forms they're taking. You won't be beguiled by flowery speech or wizard talk of division is salvation. You cannot be in conflict and know yourself. And if there's one person that you stand opposed to in this world, whether you see them as a personal situation or halfway around the world, that one person is the part of yourself that you want to leave in hell. And then all of you has to stay. One illusion, unforgiven, keeps you and the world you experience in bondage. All you have to decide is, do you want that? If you don't want to self-deceive anymore and you want to wake up from the dream of fragmentation and division, then let it be given to you. He says you don't understand how it's going to come. You'll just see the changes. It will be grace that shows them to you. It's your natural inheritance. You can actually rest back into the 0 point. You're the lost sheep. Somebody else is trying to come to you. Just let them come. Stop walking. They'll find you. And then you're going to be picked up and carried and celebrated for being found. Listen to this. The real world is a state of mind in which the mind has learned how easily do idols go when they are still perceived but wanted not. So you'll still be in the dream, but you're lucid now, gaining and gaining lucidity. And you'll realize, yes, there it is. There's the speech. There's the divisive language. There's the opportunity to judge and blame and hate. Yes, it's all there. But I don't want that. I choose not to involve myself in that. And if you're as stubborn as I am, you need a mighty companion, let me tell you. Because this guy is like a dog with a bone when it comes to hating certain people. And I have a mighty companion who gives me endless compassion and teaching me how I don't want that bone of pain anymore. And then I'm back on the bone. And when she goes to take the bone sometimes, it's my bone. It's my idol. So, yeah, we're all a work in progress. And I'm definitely, sometimes the worst of the bunch. But the more I'm bringing this into my everyday practice, there it is. I'm not going to buy into it. Less and less on the news feed. Less and less on the alternative news channels that are showing the horrors of what's going on and the deception. Less and less. I know how that works. But there's something else I want more now. I want peace instead of this. So thus is the real world's purpose gently brought into awareness to replace the goal of sin and division and guilt and all that stood between your image of yourself and what you are. Forgiveness washes away joyfully. So he just gave us the golden key on how to enter the doorway into the messianic realm. Forgive all of the idols of fear. Forgive all false appearances. Pardon them. Let them off the hook. Everyone can be seen as guiltless, even if they're psychotic, even if they're trying to destroy life. Doesn't mean you let them. In fact, you become more proactive in undoing their machinations when you can operate without the distractions of fear and judgment and hate. You can see the speck and pluck it out or curb them if they need to be curbed. But you no longer are in that place of anger and judgment. for what's going on. In fact, you'll see everything as an opportunity to forgive. Because deep down, and this might be hard to swallow for some of us who haven't been in this teaching for very long, deep down, you're only really forgiving yourself. Right? It's your dream. When you're dreaming at night, who are you interacting with? These are all products of your own consciousness. We are in a dissociative identity disorder, a multiple personality disorder. We are the one self, thinking we are many. And we're beguiled by the appearances that we are taking. And if we stay on the surface, all we focus on are the appearances. And we disassociate from one another. And we turn each other into strangers and maybe even enemies. And all the while, it is us. It's our eternal self looking at us. And we can't see it because we're caught in the illusions and delusions of false appearances. Esau becomes Yasha. The enemy becomes the savior. Everyone is offering you salvation if you forgive them, pardon them, and set them free of your stories about them. And no longer do you want to deceive yourself and feed the language, the politics, the economics, the religions, the sociologies of division. That age is done. It is joyfully swept away by this radical, universal forgiveness. It's time to know yourself as the self. Blue bag's going to go around. And a delayed welcome to those joining on YouTube and Facebook. We are happy to have you, and if you'd like to support the church and me with your donations, you can do that by clicking the link below and making sure it's for the 8 a.m. service. Grateful and appreciative for your support. So you got anything to say to me? We can't enter into reality if our mind is in conflict. If we see an enemy out there, we are simply misperceiving, and we are making that enemy based on our own thinking, our own concepts. So we are actually conflicted within ourselves. That's why he says something very powerful in the Course. All interpersonal conflict originates from an intrapersonal conflict. In other words, I'm pretending I'm the dream figure, John, and denying I'm the higher self. That is a huge identity conflict I've pushed down into my unconscious mind. And because I have this unresolved inner conflict, I can only see what I am now on the surface. I'm going to conflict with people. And I can't solve my inner conflict by fixing it only out there. I have to realize that I'm the projector of it. I'm dreaming of conflict because I'm in conflict. My brothers, we are grateful for the offering. We charge it with the blessing that it is bringing in the energies of the Messianic age, that all may be happy, all may be free, and all may be swimming in the knowledge of God. And so it is. Amen. Anybody else? All right, I guess I'll release you. So we just settle within the quiet center of the heart, this inner temple, where the usurper of false ego has been replaced with the shining light of the pure spirit that sees unity in diversity and celebrates the oneness of all living things within the light of true grace. And from this perception of the living light, we know that this light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Course in Miracles tomorrow, 7:15 p.m. Be there.